Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Ludovico Sigarsidanto. I am from class A9. So today I want to read an article. The article is about Bob Dylan, and yeah, I will start it. Okay, if you are a bright and restless teenager in a small town in America, what main ways you may well have one desire, and that is to get out, go somewhere else. Hibbing, Minnesota, is one such town, and Robert Bob Zimmerman was one such young man. In 1959, at the age of 18, Zimmerman had left Hibbing to study English at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, but formal studies were not his thing. Bob was very such into folk music and on campus and of it. Soon became a popular performer at folk clubs and folk events. Zimmerman was a bit of a long name for a cool folk singer. So Bob adopted the name of the popular radical Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, who had died 6 years previously. Robert Zimmerman became Bob Dylan. Victor is was compared to Hibbing. Minneapolis was not the throbbing cultural capital of the United States, and within a year, Bob has dropped out of university and made up his mind to pursue a career in music instead. It was a pretty big gamble. The terms for singing and career rarely went together, and there was hardly a dozen successful folk singers in the USA at the time. There was a aging Woody Guthers, the popular Pete Seegers, and the Folky Brothers Four. But Bob, now reborn as Bob Dylan, had talent, had a particular music style, and an ambition to go with it. From Minneapolis, Dylan made his way to the heart of contemporary American folk music since, since Greenwich Village in New York, reaching the city by Greyhound bus in January 1961. With little money in his pocket and no clear career plan in his head, it was, however, the start of a new chapter in his life. And at once, he began performing in local clubs, gaining attention for his talent and unique style. Performing in these coffee house and bars in Greenwich Village, playing both popular folk song and some of his own composition. Dylan soon built up a following. His distinctive nasal voice and original lyric attract the attention of music critics and fellow musicians. And just over the 3 months after he arrived in New York, an enthusiast article in the New York Times by Robert Sultan helped launch Bob Dylan on the road to success. Within weeks, Columbia Records has signed him up for a recording contract. Dylan's first album, simply titled Bob Dylan, came out in March 1962 and include a mixture of traditional folk songs such as The House of the Rising Sun and a couple of Dylan's own compositions. The album was a success, but just a foretaste of what was to follow. It was Dylan's second album that came out at a point in time when J.F. Kennedy was president of the USA. America was getting involved in Vietnam, and people were alarmed at the prospect of nuclear war. Songs like Bromine in the Wine and A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall touch on the leveling issue of the day. The 1964 album The Time They Are Changing continue the trend with socially conscious protest songs that capture the mood of the generation increasingly politicized by the civil rights movement. The Vietnam War and youthful rebellion against social conformity. Protest music was Dylan's specialty, and was the 60s war on he became the unofficial voice of the youth counterculture movement. It was in this role that the following years Dylan was billed as the top act at the July 1965 Newport Folk Festival, the biggest annual folk event in the USA. At the time, there was no clear decision between folk music using acoustic guitar and a new genre called rock and roll, or move generally pop music, which used newly introduced electric guitar. Newport was for folk fans, not rock and roll fans. So, when Dylan broke with tradition and brought a backing group with electric guitar in onto the stage to perform Meiji form and like a Rolling Stone, it caused uproar. Traditional folk fans cried traitor and tried to boo him off stage, but they failed to convince. The audience should have known what to expect as 3 months earlier Dylan has already gone electric. With his fifth album bringing it back home, younger and more avant-garde fans like what they heard, and the hero crossover from traditional folk to kind of folk rock and widely applauded. Venturing into new creative field had become one of Dylan's hallmarks. However, bringing was only the beginning of Dylan's creative evolution. His next album, Highway 61 Reserve, will be held by many as his masterpiece, featuring some of the greatest lyrics ever written, that include the momentous Desolation Row, among 12 minutes of lyrical meandering through of dystopian world populated by Cain and Abel, Einstein, Ezra Pound, and other figures from our collective culture. It was Dylan and his best. The Dylan that 51 years later will be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature from 60 from 1965 to 1967. Bob Dylan was the most influential poet and singer in the world, rivaled only perhaps by John Lennon. In 1966, he undertook the massive world tour involving 47 concerts, the last two being in Paris and London. 2 months later, everything came to a halt. Spending along the rural world and Woodstock, New York, Dylan was involved in a serious motorcycle accident. He was not killed. Indeed, within a year he had returned to recording at studio, but Dylan had changed. There was still the same nasal voice, still the folk song, still the electric guitar, but the magic had gone. Since 1967, another 28 albums have followed by recently in 2020, and this day Dylan is still recognized as a great musician, but as an icon his time is well past. Okay, that's an article about Bob Dylan, and thank you for your attention. Bye bye.